Now beginning our 26th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1350 with a release and air date of Saturday, January 11th, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone.
On the air around the world on the amateur bands and broadcast media, streaming on the internet, and podcasting since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio. Serving the amateur radio community with weekly, reliable, ham radio news and special features. We are the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1350 of This Week in Amateur Radio. An amateur radio operator must pay a significant fine in a first responder interference case. Amateur operators in Germany receive extended privileges for the 6 and 4 meter band. The solid-state era started a lot earlier than is commonly thought. The ARRL Teachers Institute is coming to a town near you in 2025. Charged. A new type of lithium-ion battery is ready to come to market. The International Amateur Radio Union Region 1 celebrates its 75th anniversary. AMSAT student members win Quarter-Century Wireless Association scholarships. Public FM broadcasters in Switzerland shut down old-fashioned analog FM repeaters. The ARRL Foundation scholarship application deadline is drawing close. NASA's Deep Space Network gets an upgrade with the installation of a new antenna. The United States is considering a ban on TP-Link routers. ARRL Winterfield Day is coming up, we will have the details. We will have the latest report from the volunteer monitoring system. And we will tell you how you can shut down the power grid via radio. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will be covering Scene 6 of his ongoing open-source project entitled The Bald Yak. This week's episode is called Chaos Will Reign. Our original amateur radio historian, the late Bill Continelli, W2XOY, returns in an encore presentation of the ancient amateur archives. In this episode, Bill will be talking about how you should develop what he calls a radio bag, a go-kit of radios and accessories that you take with you when you walk out the door in the event of an emergency. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Salyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our snowy headquarters studio just outside of Albany, New York, I'm Ryan, sitting in this week for W2XBS.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting this week from the ham shack of K2MST inside the Museum of Science and Technology in downtown Syracuse, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Albany, New York, where we have miraculously missed all the snow that's falling across New York State, I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY, wishing everyone a Happy New Year and all the best in 2025.
Reporting from our news bureau here in Naugatuck, Connecticut, where we haven't received but 2 inches of snow and it sure doesn't look like we're getting any more this season, I'm Steve Sawyer, K1FRC.
And reporting from our snowy news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from our True New York News Bureau, where I think it's too cold to snow, I'm Eric, KD2RJX.
And reporting from our Western Catskills and upstate New York radio outpost, where we're continuing to shiver in single digits, courtesy of Old Man Winter, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in the winter wonderland of Fayetteville, Arkansas, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, shoveling out from under a half-foot of snow.
This is Denny Haight, NZ8D, at our Salem News Bureau with our lead story. A ham radio operator in Idaho must pay a record $34,000 penalty for causing interference with communications during a fire suppression effort. That's the ruling from the Federal Communications Commission in the case of Jason Frawley, licensee of amateur station WA7CQ. When the Commission issued its notice of liability 2.5 years ago, Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel wrote, "You can't interfere with public safety communications, full stop. So today, we propose the largest fine of its type for this interference that put fire suppression and public safety itself at risk." Frawley acknowledged that he operated on a frequency without authorization, but argued that he did not interfere with government communications and was trying to help. He asked for a cancellation or reduction, but the Commission has rejected his appeal. It's not clear why the FCC took so long to finalize the penalty. When the forfeiture finally was adopted the day after Christmas, Commissioner Nathan Symington dissented but did not release a reason. The FCC said that in 2021, Frawley willfully and repeatedly operated without authorization and interfered with radio communications of the United States Forest Service, which was attempting to direct operations of fire suppression aircraft working a 1,000-acre wildfire on national forest land near Elk River, Idaho. The FCC said that over a 2-day period, Frawley transmitted 8 times without authorization on a frequency allocated to government use. The Forest Service complained about transmissions on 151.145 MHz. According to its case summary, the frequency is in the public safety pool that was being used by the Forest Service and the Idaho Department of Lands to coordinate the firefighting. The complaint stated that the individual had caused radio frequency interference to communications with U.S. Forest Service firefighters' fire suppression aircraft, the FCC wrote. The complaint alleged that on July 17th and 18th, 2021, the individual had interrupted fire suppression activities and had begun advising the firefighters and aircraft personnel of hazards at a radio repeater site located at Elk Butte. The complaint also stated that the individual had identified himself on the radio as a ComTech and his location as the Elk River Airstrip. The FCC said that on July 18th, the Fire Operations Section Chief left the scene of the fire, drove to the airstrip, and told Frawley to cease operations on the frequency. In 2022, the FCC issued its notice of liability as we reported at the time. In response, Frawley did not contest that he had operated unauthorized on a government frequency, but he said he made 6 transmissions, not 8, that the total duration of the transmissions, including the firefighters' responses, was less than 1 minute, and that he did not cause interference to ongoing communications. He said he made the transmissions with good faith and non-malicious intent to help, that he hadn't been given a warning before being fined, that he had a history of compliance, and that he can't afford to pay the penalty. He submitted tax forms as evidence. Frawley said his actions should not be handled like those of someone who had malicious intent or deliberately jammed signals. Instead, an admonishment would be more appropriate. But the FCC is unmoved. We have fully considered the arguments and accompanying financial information set forth in Frawley's notice of apparent liability response and subsequent filings, but we find none of them persuasive, the Commission has ruled. It said the base forfeiture is $10,000 per violation for each of the 2 days that Frawley operated without a license on 151.145 MHz, and $7,000 for each of the 2 days that he caused interference to authorized stations. It added that it had actually chosen not to adjust the penalty upwards, as it has done in certain past cases. Further, while the FCC acknowledged that one of its criteria for reducing a penalty is good faith or voluntary disclosure, it said it has no precedent for applying good faith intention in a case involving first responders. Even if it had, the Commission ruled, this instance was particularly serious and could have had significant negative consequences for first responders who are fighting a significant wildfire. Also, Frawley asserts that he is no longer engaging in authorized transmissions on public safety frequencies, and, moreover, that the wide publicity surrounding this matter has already deterred similar behavior by himself and others. But the FCC said his case is different from those where a violator took affirmative steps to remedy an ongoing or persistent violation, like providing a missing application or installing missing equipment. We declined to grant a downward adjustment based solely on a violator's inaction. And the Commission said that although Frawley's financial documents on their own could support a reduction, given the totality of the circumstances and facts before us, we find his ability to pay is outweighed by the nature of the violations themselves and their potential threat to public safety communications.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
The German Regulatory Office for Telecommunications, known as BNetzA, has granted temporary access for 6 meters for Class E license holders at 100 watts between 50 and 50.4 megahertz, and using reduced power of 25 watts between 50.4 and 52 megahertz on a non-interference basis. The trial period lasts until December 2025 for Class E amateurs, the equivalent of the United States General Class license. According to the regulatory announcement made in December, full license holders are receiving extended access to 6 meters at the same power levels and 70.15 MHz to 70.21 MHz in the 4-meter band at 25 watts of power on a trial basis until December 2026.
Authorities in the United States are considering a ban on China's TP-Link technology company over potential national security concerns after its home internet routers were linked to cyber attacks, says IT News, quoting a Wall Street Journal report. The U.S. Commerce, Defense, and Justice Departments have opened separate probes into the company, with authorities targeting a ban on the sale of TP-Link routers in the U.S. as early as this year. An office of the Commerce Department has even subpoenaed the company while the Defense Department launched its investigation into Chinese manufactured routers earlier this year, the newspaper reported, citing people familiar with the matter. Last year, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency said TP-Link routers had a vulnerability that could be exploited to execute remote code. Shares of Netgear, a San Jose-based home networking company and a TP-Link rival, jumped more than 12% following the report.
Winter Field Day, hosted by the Winter Field Day Association, is scheduled to run from 1900 UTC on Saturday, January 25th, through 1859 UTC on Sunday, January 26th. John Ross, KD8 IDJ, is here with the details.
WFD is held on the last full weekend in January and is a communications exercise. It can be worked from the comfort of your home or from a remote location. You can participate by yourself, with your friends and family, or with a local club. WFD is designed to help increase your level of preparedness for disasters and for you to improve and practice your operating skills in winter environments, as the potential for freezing temperatures, snow, ice, and other hazards present unique operating conditions. WFD is open to participants worldwide. As a matter of fact, amateur radio operators may use frequencies on the HF, VHF, or UHF bands and are free to use any mode that can faithfully transmit the required exchange intact. Similar to ARRL's Field Day, bonus points are earned in several ways, including from using non-commercial power sources, operating from remote locations, and making satellite contacts, and more. Make sure you register your location at the WFD registration page, and to date there are 345 locations registered around the world. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
If you participate in Winter Field Day, remember to mark your calendar for the 2025 ARRL Field Day on June 28th and 29th. For additional information, visit the Field Day page on the League website.
It is time for the first Volunteer Monitor Program report of 2025. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. Here is this month's activity report of the VM program. An amateur radio operator in Wyoming received a commendation for relinquishing 3.927 MHz during a regularly scheduled net operation to allow emergency traffic related to the Asheville, North Carolina, floods and relief efforts on September 24, 2024. An amateur radio operator in Florida received a commendation for work on the Florida SAR net on the 444.325 MHz repeater, in cooperation with Florida's State Emergency Agency, during a hurricane and ensuing storm. An amateur radio operator in Illinois received a commendation for working with a local emergency management agency on the W9ANL 146.900 MHz repeater in an effort to clear down trees and power lines after storms. Technician class operators in Idaho and Washington received advisory notices about FT8 operation on 40 meters. Technicians have only CW privileges on 40 meters. Meanwhile, 2 technician class operators in California, and 1 in Oregon, received advisory notices concerning operation of FT8 on 20 meters. Technicians have no operating privileges on 20 meters. An operator in South Carolina received an advisory notice concerning interference on 3.933 MHz after refusing to leave a net operating on that frequency. An operator in New York received an advisory notice concerning interference on 7.200 MHz with digital signals such as EasyPAL, Freenet, and SSTV, as well as general noises. An operator in Alabama received an advisory notice concerning operation on SAR net utilizing harassment and a false call sign. Each licensee was cautioned that such operation would be an issue during any license renewal proceedings. There were 2 volunteer monitor alerts issued in October 2024 to monitors east of the Mississippi, to monitor for interference to hurricane and tropical storm emergency nets during the month. No instances of interference were detected. The totals for this report's monitoring were 1,443 hours on HF frequencies and 1,761 hours on VHF frequencies and above, for a total of 3,204 hours. We thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
Registration is now open for the 2025 Dayton Contest University, or CTU, to be held all day on Thursday, May 15, 2025, at the Hope Hotel on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base the day before Hamvention opens in Xenia, Ohio. 2025 will be the 16th year for Contest University at Dayton. 8 different countries have hosted CTUs, including the USA, Australia, Russia, Germany, Italy, England, Brazil, and Finland. Over 10,000 students have attended these CTUs, with more than 100 CTU professors sharing their contesting experiences. The 2025 CTU Dayton course outline will be posted once all have been confirmed. Each presentation is carefully prepared with up-to-date information. CTU professors are experienced contesters who will share their knowledge, and participants can ask questions and learn new ways to enjoy contesting. Videos and PDF presentations from past CTUs can be viewed at contestuniversity.com. There are scholarships available for CTU through a grant from the Northern California DX Foundation for students aged 25 or younger. Student registration information is on the CTU website, contestuniversity.com.
Conventional wisdom has it that the solid-state era in electronics began in 1948 with the invention of the transistor, or, if you wish to split hairs, with the 1930s invention by the Russian Oleg Lozev of an early form of tunnel diode. But there's an earlier amplifier technology that used a solid-state circuit, which is largely forgotten, and AWA Communications Technology Museum has featured it in a new video. We're talking, of course, about the carbon microphone amplifier, a piece of telephone technology which made its way into consumer electronics. The carbon microphone is a container of loosely packed carbon granules acted upon by a diaphragm. Vibrations from sound compress and decompress the granules, changing the electrical resistance of the carbon. It was the standard microphone used in telephone handsets for most of the 20th century. Being a resistor, it can be placed in a potential divider circuit that produces some significant voltage swings, so when the vibrations come from a high-impedance earpiece, it itself can make an amplifier. It's not a very good amplifier. It has lousy bandwidth, high distortion and noise characteristics, but it's just about good enough to be paired with a 1920s crystal set.
Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation, HamSci, will hold its 2025 Community Workshop on March 14th and 15th, 2025, at the New Jersey Institute of Technology in Newark, New Jersey. The theme for this year's conference is HAMSAI's Big Year and will provide an opportunity for both amateur radio and professional research communities to collaborate and share ideas. The session, planned for Friday, will be organized in the format of a traditional science workshop with a full day's program of oral, technical, and scientific presentations. The Saturday session will focus more on the citizen science or volunteer aspect of HAMSAI, where amateur radio operators make the greatest impact. HAMSAI and the New Jersey Institute of Technology will be hosting a banquet on Friday night with a keynote speaker. Conference and registration details will be available soon. For more information about HAMSAI and to join the mailing list and receive their quarterly newsletter, please visit the HAMSAI website.
Coming up on our 26th year keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio. Available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
The ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology is going mobile in 2025. And here with all the details is John Ross, KD8IDJ, with this special report from League headquarters.
In addition to the cohorts hosted at ARRL headquarters in Newington, Connecticut, there will be several sessions around the United States this year. The first, hosted by ARRL Model School Staten Island Technical High School in New York City, will be held January 21st through the 24th. The format is being refined this year from 5 days till 4. That change, along with taking the show on the road, is expected to make it easier for educators to attend, according to ARRL Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA. Especially for educators juggling a busy family life, a 4-day work program near them might be an easier option than a 5-day trip to New England. Plans are also being finalized for a session in Kilgore, Texas in July and another in the southeastern U.S. The programming and support continue to evolve. We really want to support these TI graduates after they leave, so we've rolled out a Discord server so they can stay in touch with their peers who are also implementing the material they learned here, said Goodgame. Providing community support and engagement has proven key to the ongoing success from the program. Staten Island Tech High School's program is led by Everett Enriquez, KD2ZZT, a two-time ARRLTI attendee. Enriquez has helped many of his students not only get licensed, but also be generally engaged in amateur radio. Enriquez will help ARR Education Specialist Wayne Green, KB4DSF, teach the program. By developing the network of educators who have benefited from the program and by offering the regional opportunities, Goodgame hopes to receive more applications to attend. TI is free for educators thanks to funding from donors to the ARRL Education and Technology Fund. There is a $100 application fee if the educator is accepted. Goodgame sees a long-term benefit to wrapping genuine fun into this radio-centric curriculum. Inspiration drives innovation, so if we don't inspire young people to innovate and expose them to RF, they are not going to innovate in those fields, he said. Somebody will, it's just not going to be our kids. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
To learn more about the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology and to apply to attend, head to arrl.org/TI.
Researchers have been testing a new type of lithium-ion battery that uses single-crystal electrodes. Over several years, they have found that the technology could keep 80% of its capacity after 20,000 charge and discharge cycles. For reference, a conventional cell reaches 80% after about 2,400 cycles. The researchers say that the number of cycles will be equivalent to driving about 8 million kilometers in an electric vehicle. This is within striking distance of having the battery last longer than the other parts of the vehicle. The researchers employed synchrotron X-ray diffraction to study the wear on the electrodes. One interesting result is that after use, the single crystal electrode showed very little degradation. According to reports, the batteries are already in production, and they expect to see them used more often in the near future. The technology shows promise, too, for other demanding battery applications, like grid storage.
The International Amateur Radio Union Region 1 interim meeting and 75-year celebration will be held in Paris, France on April 24th and 25th. The IARU 100-year celebration will be on April 26th, but with a separate invitation by the IARU International Secretariat. The Region 1 interim meeting is both an intermediate and a preparatory meeting before the General Conference in Vienna, Austria in 2026, and allows member associates to work on proposals and challenges facing Region 1. At the interim meeting, committees may make proposals and recommendations, which can be approved by the Executive Committee in between the General Conferences. Depending on the subject, these proposals or recommendations may have to be ratified subsequently by the General Conference. Since its founding in Paris, France, the IARU has worked tirelessly to promote innovation in amateur radio and to encourage the growth of the service in communities throughout the world.
The 129th Boston Marathon will take place Monday, April 21st, 2025, and registration is now open for volunteer amateur radio operators. Volunteers are needed to support operations throughout the 26.2-mile course, along with amateur support in the start and finish areas and along the transportation bus network. To register as an amateur radio operator, you first must have or create an account for the Boston Athletic Association Athletes Village. Volunteer registration closes Friday, February 7th at 5 p.m. Eastern. For additional information, contact Marty Sulloway at N1C at the Boston Athletic Association Athletes Village Communications Committee. And as a side note, I used to volunteer for the Boston Marathon many years in a row back in the 1990s when Bob, NA1Q, used to run it from Worcester Polytech. Steve Sawyer, K1FRC.
FM radio broadcasting continued its vanishing act in Switzerland this week. On December 31st, the Swiss Broadcasting Corporation shut off an estimated 850 analog FM transmitters, leaving listeners the option of either internet radio or DAB+ for stations SRF1, SRF2 Coulter, and SRF3. The changeover by the nation's public broadcaster now leaves about 24 private radio stations still transmitting their programs over standard broadcast FM. However, they are expected to follow the Swiss Broadcasting Corporation's move, completing the transition no later than the end of 2026. The Swiss Federal Office of Communications reports that the popularity of DAB+ and Internet radio has been growing consistently since 2015, while only 10% of the nation's radio listeners still tune in to broadcast FM, most while driving in their vehicles.
As packet radio gains wider usage among hams involved in emergency communications, one East Coast network is looking to add more nodes to deepen its reach. Using mostly near-vertical incident skywave range links, the Packet Radio RF Forwarding Network, or TPRFN, connects standalone nodes and VHF and UHF packet networks to the HF bands. The result is efficient, low-bandwidth communications valued for its simple infrastructure and reliability, as well as its interoperability with email, internet gateways, and SMS messaging. Radios, modems, and simple hardware form its backbone. In the United States, the network reaches as far south as Florida and as far north as Maine. Operators are now hoping to create an NVIS link between Maine and New York and another one between Florida and Virginia. Just as important is its goal of adding more nodes, especially those connecting the East Coast to any states farther west. At present, there is only one node west of the region, and that is in Wisconsin. According to the website, the network also needs more nodes in the northeastern United States. All of this planning comes as operators prepare for their first net of the year, which will take place on Sunday, January 19th at 0000 UTC. Additional details can be found on their website at tprfn.net. As the website notes, the ultimate goal is to provide valuable digital communications without the need for the Internet.
Installation of the latest antenna took place on December 18th, when teams at NASA's Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex near Barstow, California, installed the 133-ton reflector framework for Deep Space Station 23, a multi-frequency beam waveguide antenna. When operational in 2026, Deep Space Station 23 will receive transmissions from missions such as Perseverance, Psyche, Europa, Clipper, Voyager 1, and a growing fleet of future human and robotic spacecraft in deep space. Construction of the new antenna has been underway for more than 4 years, and during the installation, teams used a crawler crane to lower the metal skeleton of the 34-meter-wide parabolic reflector before it was bolted to a 20-meter-high alidade, a platform above the antenna's pedestal that will steer the reflector during operations. One of the biggest challenges facing us during the lift was to ensure that 40 bolt holes were perfectly aligned between the structure and the alidade, said Germain Aziz, Systems Engineer, Deep Space Network Aperture Enhancement Program of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California. This required a meticulous emphasis on alignment prior to the lift to guarantee everything went smoothly on the day. This addition to the Deep Space Network represents a crucial communication upgrade for the agency, said Kevin Coggins, Deputy Associate Administrator of NASA's Space Communications and Navigation Program. The communications infrastructure has been in continuous operations since its creation in 1963. And with this upgrade, we are ensuring NASA is ready to support the growing number of missions exploring the Moon, Mars, and beyond. With the Deep Space Network, we are able to explore the Martian landscape with our rovers, see the James Webb Space Telescope's stunning cosmic observations, and so much more, said Lori Leshin, director of JPL. The network enables over 40 deep space missions, including the farthest human-made objects in the universe, Voyager 1 and 2. With upgrades like these, the network will continue to support humanity's exploration of our solar system and beyond, enabling groundbreaking science and discovery far into the future. NASA's Deep Space Network is managed by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. Happy New Year! I hope the New Year is off and running for you. If you participated in the CQ Marathon, I hope you did well and you've got off to a great start in 2025. I have good news and bad news for my marathon score. The good news is I had my best score ever. The bad news is I was pretty sick the first week of January and I did not meet the submission deadline, so I couldn't get it in. Better luck next year, I guess, and I'm off to a good start, so I'm optimistic. Why don't you make it your resolution to send me at least one email this year telling me what you want to hear, what you don't want to hear, how your DX chase is going, and what other topics we can cover. You can email me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. So let's get started on our DX news. This DX news comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Antonio, IK7WUL, is heading to Africa on a humanitarian mission. He might be able to get on the air toward the end of January. His first stop, which will be January 26th to the 31st, will be in Burkina Faso, X-Ray Tango, but his call sign has not yet been issued. His next stop will be February 1st to the 6th, when he will go to Ghana with the call sign 9 Golf 5 India Kilo. From there, he'll go to Togo, February 6th to the 14th, and will be on the air as 5 Victor 0 Delta X-Ray. He will wrap up his trip February 14th to the 23rd in Benin as Tango Yellow 2 Alpha Alpha. These dates are, quote, a little bit fluid. If Antonio is able to get on the air, it will most likely be on 10-meter sideband. Antonio is looking for sponsors to try to help children less fortunate than ours. Sponsorship is also sought for QSLs and, quote, transport of radio material. Anyone interested can contact Antonio at his 5 Victor 0 Delta Bravo QRZ address for more details and a donation link. Harold, DF2WO, will return to Rwanda January 27th to February 15th. As in the past, this solo holiday-style 9 X-Ray 2 Alpha Whiskey operation from Kigali will be on 160 meters through 6 plus the QO100 satellite. F5 NVF GG will be active holiday-style from Benin as TY5 Charlie January 10th to April 2nd. He will be in vacation mode and will operate CW, FT8, and very little sideband on the HF bands, and hopefully will get in some 6 meters. You can QSL to F5 RAV or via LOTW. Darren, VK4 MAP, will be active holiday style as H40DA from Pigeon Islands in the Reef Islands. He arrived there January 2nd after a short stay in Honoria, and he will be there for 2 weeks, pending the availability of flights from Lomlon Island. Darren's previous work as H40 Delta Alpha in the Solomons was in 2017 from Nendo Island. His station will consist of an ICOM IC7300 with 100 watts into a Bushcom SWC100 dipole. He will operate sideband on 80 through 10 meters, including 12 meters. Logs will be uploaded at the conclusion of the activity. Livio IZ3BUR will be back in Guinea-Bissau, which is J5, January 26th to March 1st. In his free time, he will be QRV as J52EC. You can listen for him on 20 through 10 meter sidebands, and he will try digital modes. Members of the Rebel DX group have announced their plans to be active as ZK3ZK from Tokalu around mid-June 2025. ZK3 has not been on the air since 2019 and is number 42 on the Club Log DXCC Most Wanted list. More details will follow. If you need Tokalu, this is going to be a good chance to get it because it's not been on since 2019 and it's every 5 to 10 years that it comes on. And you got to start thinking ahead, like in 5 years, the propagation's not going to be what it is now, so let's get him now while he's active. Larry, VK9/W5EIT, will be on the air from Cocos Keeling February 11th to the 18th with his IC705 and 10 watts to a super antenna MP1C vertical and an end-fed half-wave antenna with a tuner on 40 through 10 meters. His modes will be CW, FT8, and FT4, and perhaps sideband if conditions are good, he says. We have an update on the QSL status from the Sierra Leone 9 Lima 5 Alpha DXpedition. The following QSL update is from the 9 Lima 5 Alpha website. Quote, OQRS is open and can now receive your QSL request for 9 Lima 5 Alpha. It was planned to do faster, but we had to deal with more than 500 requests for corrections, which we preferred to process before so that the last log uploaded is as correct as possible. Thanks go to F1 ULQ for this important job. Please be a little patient to receive your QSL as they're not yet printed. If no major problem is detected, LOTW will be loaded for everyone in the next few days. From the Sierra 9 Zulu group, we have this update. The issues involving LOTW uploads have been resolved. OQRS is functioning and receiving requests. All OQRS requests are also being uploaded as they are received. QSL cards are ordered and expected soon. Should you have an issue or an inquiry, please contact K4NHW. Alan, KH7AL/KH9 on Wake Island, expects soon to have a multi-band DX Commander vertical. This will allow him to be QRV on 12 meters in the coming weeks. In September of 2024, OK6DJ David announced that he and OK7GU were going to Rodriguez Island, 3 Baker 9, where they would be QRV as 3 Baker 9 Delta Juliet in March or April. They can now announce that the dates are specific, March 24th to April 5th. They will be joined by OK1 CRM and OK2 ZA. Plans are now to be QRV on 160 through 10 meters using CW, FT8, and sideband. A DXpedition to Mozambique, originally planned for January 18th to February 1st, is being rescheduled to early 2026. The organizers wrote, quote, "It is with deep disappointment that we must inform you that due to the current security situation in Mozambique, we are compelled to postpone our planned expedition originally scheduled for departure on January 17th of 2025, end quote. They cited multiple travel advisories about security concerns in the South African nation and are hopeful that the political situation will stabilize in the next year. So I know that the ARL contest sheet is read elsewhere in the podcast and that the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or to get entities or zones in the log that may otherwise be difficult to get. So here's an important reminder for you IOTA or Island on the Air enthusiasts. You are reminded that January 31 is the last date for submitting application or score updates to checkpoints for inclusion in the 2025 honor roll and annual listings. If submitted after that date, they will be processed in the normal way, but the scores will be held over to the following year's listing. Where packages with cards are involved, these need to be posted dated before January 31, and in countries where the postal service to the checkpoint is occasionally subject to delay, it is best to mail them early so as to avoid missing the final date for completion of the exercise. It is important that the participants who have not yet updated since the 2020 annual listings, but wish to remain listed within the 5-year window, should make a submission on or before January 31 UTC. If you have not logged into your record for more than 2 years, you will need to revalidate your registration. Do not leave this to the last moment, as you will run out of time. The year 2025 will mark the centenary of the Réseau des Amateurs Français, or the REF, and the International Amateur Radio Union, the IARU. In commemoration of this significant event, the REF, a member of the IARU, is organizing a radio challenge for all licensed amateur radio operators and shortwave listeners worldwide. This centenary challenge aims to celebrate 100 years of our association's activities by bringing the amateur radio community together in a convivial activity. This challenge will take place from April 1st to June 30th, 2025, and will include contacts made on all bands from 160 through 3 centimeters, as well as the QO100 satellite. So hey Joe, that includes 60 meters. The following modes will be utilized: sideband, CW, and digital modes such as FT8, FT4, RTTY, and PSK31, etc. Cross-mode band contacts, as well as those using terrestrial repeaters or connections assisted by radio internet or similar means, will not be permitted. The station TM100 REF is the organizing team during the commemoration period. Each QSO within the activation will be counted once per band and mode, allowing all stations, irrespective of geographic distinctions, to earn a certificate in this exercise. A trophy and a commemorative book on the history of the REF will be awarded during Ham Expo 2025 to the top participant in each category: sideband, CW, digital, and mixed. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3, and thanks to my ex-WOW Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-up.
Are you ready for another excursion into amateur radio history? This is Bill Continelli, W2XOY, and I'll be back in a moment with another installment of the Ancient Amateur Archives.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
I grew up in a family of nomads. A full tank of gas was always an invitation to another cross-country trip. Throughout the late 1950s, 1960s, and early 1970s, a variety of Ford station wagons and VW buses took us through 45 states and 4 Canadian provinces. When I became interested in radio in the early 1960s, my gypsy lifestyle suggested radios that were transistorized and compact, ready to go on a moment's notice on the latest family adventure. For our California trip in 1964, I packed a Realtone AM/FM shortwave radio, 2 Olson 100 milliwatt CB walkie-talkies, and spare batteries into an old, battered briefcase. Thus, the radio bag was born. The radio bag varied in style, shape, and contents as the years passed. By the early 1970s, it was an old high school book bag, stuffed with a Lafayette Dynacom 3-watt, 3-channel CB walkie-talkie, a standard 2-watt, 5-channel 2-meter HT, a realistic Patrolman AM/FM shortwave police band radio, and spare batteries. A second bag contained a Lafayette HA750 6-meter rig, a Midland CB radio converted to 10 meters, and a Heathkit HW8, along with tons of D cells and antennas. The first bag went with me everywhere. The second was for long trips only. Besides allowing me to enjoy my hobby on the road, the radio bags proved useful in emergencies. They saw a great deal of use during Buffalo's ice storm of 1976 and blizzard of 1977. In the winter of 1978, the radio bag was literally a lifesaver. While on a Greyhound bus from Buffalo to Albany, our bus had to leave the thruway near Waterloo, New York because of heavy snow. While trying to get to Route 5, the bus became stuck on some railroad tracks. The Standard and Lafayette radios quickly brought the police and a tow truck. Greyhound never thanked me. The radio bag was with me in Lower Manhattan on September 11th, 2001, when the World Trade Center was destroyed. Because of poor planning on my part, I did not have the local ham or public service frequencies pre-programmed. Nevertheless, my coworkers and I were able to use the information gleaned from various radios to get on the only Amtrak train to leave Penn Station that day. With this reinforcement of the radio bag permanently etched in my brain, I came up with the new and improved model. It's a padded camera bag which measures about 12 inches times 9 inches times 8 inches, less than a cubic foot. How much can you fit in? Here's the answer. 2 Yaesu FT dual-band HTs. Why 2 HTs? Well, one can operate as a scanner while the other one is on the ham bands. Or you can give one to a fellow ham for use at the emergency site. And, based on Murphy's Law, if you didn't have the second unit, the first would fail at the moment it was needed the most. Of course, having the second unit means the first one will never fail. At a bare minimum, the radio should have full 2-meter 440 MHz coverage, transmit and receive, as well as extended receive from 118 to 174 MHz and 440 through 470 MHz. Ideally, the receivers should also cover TV audio, FM broadcast, and the 800 MHz bands. This eliminates the need for a separate scanner. One reason I prefer the Yaesu FT50 over the newer VX5 or VX7 is that the FT50 has an optional alkaline battery case that holds 6 AA cells. That's not available on the other radios. In the field, you are not going to have the time or opportunity to recharge batteries. A battery case for 6 AA alkaline cells is necessary for long operating times and quicker battery replacement. In addition to the 2 dual-band HTs, I also carry a GMRS radio. Note, I didn't say FRS, but rather GMRS. The unit should cover the GMRS FRS simplex channels 1 through 7, which runs from 462.5625 to 462.7125 MHz, plus the react frequency of 462.675 MHz simplex and repeater. I prefer GMRS over FRS radios because GMRS units operate with more power, between 2 and 5 watts versus 500 milliwatts for FRS, more modulation, 5 kHz deviation for GMRS versus 2.5 kHz for FRS. They have repeater capability and can be connected to an external antenna. My radio is a Maxon GMRS 210, identical in size and shape to the Radio Shack 2-meter HT. It is also equipped with a 6 AA alkaline battery case. I also carry a CB walkie-talkie. Yes, CB is still alive and millions of people still use it. A link to 27 MHz may be essential in an emergency. I carry a Midland 75-785. It's compact, well-built, covers all 40 channels, has good modulation, operates on 9 AA cells, and has a BNC antenna connector. Similar units were available from Cobra, Uniden, Radio Shack, and Maxon. I say were because it seems that the CB walkie-talkie is headed for extinction, killed off by FRS radios. Very few catalogs or websites have new CB walkie-talkies for sale. The good news is, if you can find one, it may be at a deep discount. I bought my Midland new for $15. I also have a pocket-sized AM/FM shortwave radio. My favorite is the Sony ICF SW11. It measures 6 inches by 3 inches, covers AM, FM, and the shortwave broadcast bands from 60 meters through 13 meters. It is inexpensive and has excellent sensitivity. The Grundig Traveler 2 is a good second choice. I also have a PDA or palm top with email capability. I use a Sharp Zorus. It's an electronic organizer with 1 megabyte of capacity. It has the usual functions, scheduler, word processing, spreadsheet, money tracker, etc., a traditional keyboard, plus the ability to send and receive text email. I now store frequencies, repeater offsets, and PL tones for every city I visit in my Zorus. Don't forget a flashlight and a small utility tool, such as the Leatherman. And you'll need telescopic antennas for all radios, along with any necessary adapters. Carry at least 18 AA alkaline batteries. All the radios and the flashlight in my unit operate off of AA's batteries for convenience. Each radio has fresh batteries, and they are tested every 3 months. 2 cigarette lighter cords. One is for the Yaesu FT50s, and one is for the Maxon and Midland. A small disposable camera. I didn't have this with me on 9/11/01, and I regret it to this day. A cell phone. However, based on my experience on September 11, 2001, it may prove to be useless in an emergency due to power failures and/or overloading. Yes, all of this fits in the camera bag with some room to spare. As you can see, I've tailored my radio bag based on my personal preferences. You can add, subtract, or substitute radios depending on your individual needs. Whatever the final configuration looks like, make sure that the radio bag is always with you. I also have a second radio bag for long trips or a major emergency. It contains a Yaesu FT817 HF VHF UHF rig, plus batteries, a power cord, and telescopic antennas for 7 MHz through 440 MHz. This radio went with me on month-long trips to Phoenix, Seattle, and Memphis, and earned me a 1010 number from the middle of the Arizona desert. The only reason I do not recommend this radio for your primary radio bag is its excessive current consumption, 400 milliamps on receive, 2 amps on transmit. One final note. The last time I left the house without the radio bag was January 17th, 1981. How do I remember that date? Well, as I was driving to the store, my VW bus decided to throw a rod after 185,000 miles of faithful service. As I pushed it off the road, I witnessed a car-pedestrian accident in which a 10-year-old boy was seriously injured. The motto, where I go, so goes the radios.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. AMSAT has been working on the GULF project. GULF stands for Greater Orbit, Larger Footprint. Although FCC rules have changed and we must jump through a few more hoops when launching a satellite to higher orbits, we look to overcome the obstacles. One is the mitigation of space debris after the end of your mission. In other words, we must bring the satellite back into the Earth's atmosphere so it can burn up. No more leaving things in space and hoping that nothing will happen to other orbiting objects. How will we do that? Possibly momentum wheels to change the attitude of the satellite to create more drag, or use an attitude determination and control subsystem, ADICS for short. Then have some type of propulsion system to push the satellite to a lower orbit, allowing it to deteriorate into the Earth's atmosphere. There are many types of propulsion systems. All this and more going on behind the scenes to design, build, and ultimately launch a new generation of satellites. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time once again for our solar weather and propagation report. This week's rather truncated report comes from our solar prognosticator, Tad Cook, K7RA, in Seattle, Washington. Solar activity was a bit weaker over the past week. The average daily sunspot number was 159.1. Looking at the predicted solar flux for the near term is 165 on January 11th and 12th, 160 on January 13th through the 15th, then 180, 190, 200, 210 and 220 on January 16th through the 20th. Predicted planetary A index is 8, 8, 8, 5, 5 and 12 on January 11th through the 16th, and will hold steady at a value of 10 on January 17th through the 20th.
Just ahead in radio sport this week, January 11th, it's the YBDX contest, that's phone. January 11th and 12th, the UBA PSK 63 prefix contest, that's digital. Also on January 11th through the 12th, the SKCC Weekend Sprintathon, that's CW. And January 11th through the 12th, the North American QSO Party, that is CW as well. On January 12th, the NRAU Baltic Contest, single sideband and phone. On January 12th, it's the DARC 10-meter contest, CW and phone. And also on January 12th, the NRAU Baltic Contest, that is CW. Upcoming Section, State, and Division Conventions, January 10th through the 11th, 2025, the Southwest Florida Regional Hamfest, hosting the ARRL Southern Florida Section Convention, that's in Fort Myers, Florida. January 17th through the 18th, the Cowtown Hamfest 25, hosting the ARRL North Texas Section Convention in Forest Hills, Texas. January 31st through February 1st is the Jackson MS Capital City Hamfest 2025, hosting the ARRL Mississippi Section Convention in Jackson, Mississippi. And on February 7th through the 9th, the Orlando Hamcation, hosting the ARRL Southeastern Division Convention in Orlando, Florida.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Life is messy. This is not a revelation. We attempt to organize this chaos by using all kinds of magic incantations, to-do lists, New Year's resolutions, plans, projects, and anything else you might have in your arsenal. The same chaos reigns in how we make progress. Some days are harder than others. I'm mentioning this because I've seen a couple of amateurs share all the things they didn't achieve last year. If we used that metric, I could point out that I didn't win the lotto. Likely neither did you, or your friends. I didn't get on HF to make a contact. I didn't put up a 6B TV antenna. The list is never ending. In other words, it's easy to say what you didn't do. What if you turn this upside down? I hosted my weekly radio net for its 13th year. I had my beacon heard more times than I have bandwidth available to check right now. I started a project that looks like it's going to keep me busy for some time to come. I've been working my way through a full system crash, and I can see light out the end of the tunnel 6 months later. So don't beat yourself up about all the things you didn't do. Speaking of that, making plans is fine, but don't use the to-do list as a way to describe all the things you didn't do. Instead, think of it as an inspiration for what to do when you're bored. Chaotic aspects of life aside, the same disorder reigns supreme in the software world. GNU Radio, on which I'm basing the Bold Yak project, is just as chaotic. New versions are released regularly. Right now it's at version 3.10 point something. On my Mac it's 3.10.11.0. On my Debian machine it's 3.10.5.1. Depending on which operating system you use, it's different. There's a wiki table, but that's out of date. Before you ask, yes, I've requested an account on the GNU Radio Wiki so I can fix it. This only scratches the surface of things that are, for want of a better word, disharmonious. This might be perceived as chaos, but the reality is that this exists throughout the computing world. If you're not a software developer, you might have only scratched the surface of this, trying to open a document written for a different version of your word processor, installing a new operating system and finding software that was working perfectly before suddenly doesn't. GNU Radio is a complex beast. The latest release has 5,570 files, making nearly 80,000 lines of source and related code. The Git repository shows 579 authors, and I will point out that it's likely there are more, since the project was first released in 2001. but the Git repository only goes back to 2006. Said differently, this is a big project that nobody is likely to hold entirely inside their brain. It means that things change without everyone involved knowing about it. I'm raising this because we're diving into a complex environment that we're using to build ourselves a new thing. At this point, you might want to run for the hills. I understand. One of the great things about society is our ability to abstract. It's why I'm typing on a keyboard with letters of the alphabet and not punching holes into cardboard. It's why I'm looking at a screen with graphics and controlling images with my finger, rather than looking at dozens of blinking lights that provide a lifetime of memories. GNU radio is the abstraction of radio. That's the whole point. It allows us to pick up a signal block, tell it to make a kilohertz tone, connect it to my loudspeaker so sound comes out. It looks simple on the outside, but underlying that is a level of complexity that you will only encounter when it comes to raise its chaotic head. This all to say that I did make some progress. When you play an audio tape at half speed or play a single at 33 RPM instead of 45 RPM, the result is that the audio is slower, but it also means that the audio is lower in frequency. It led me to wonder if I can use that phenomenon to help me hear better. What if I could play audio slower and have my ears be able to hear better? Right now, anything above 2 kilohertz is hard to hear. I keep asking my partner, say again, sorry, what? Sorry, I didn't hear that. Hearing aids seem to attempt to deal with the problem by amplifying the sounds you cannot hear. This results in squealing and all manner of other unpleasantness. It also doesn't seem to help me. Instead, I wondered if I could halve a 4 kHz tone to 2 kHz, I could hear it. So, if I play audio at half speed, I can hear more. Unfortunately, it would also mean that I would be running behind all the time. So, what if I could play at half speed and remove half the audio samples? I can confirm that with simple tones this works, and I did this inside GNU Radio with pretty much one block. Keep M in N samples. In this case, keep 1 in 2. I halved the sample rate and all was well. Why is this significant? Well, aside from that it might help me hear better, it represents the first time I had an idea that I could try out in real time and see what it did. For a bunch of reasons, I haven't yet moved on to actually hearing it by setting the source as the microphone and the sync as my headphones, but that's on the cards soon. Making progress is a series of chaotic steps that take you on a journey. If you're lucky, the journey will get you to where you want to go. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
Coming up on our 26th year keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio. Available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
The Quarter Century Wireless Association has announced AMSAT student members Ruth Willett, KM4LAO, and Grace Papai, K8LG, as two of its 2024-25 scholarship winners. Ruth was the first licensed in 2015 and passed her extra in May of 2016. She was the first Carol Perry Young Professional Award winner in 2023, and named the ARRL Hiram Percy Maxim Memorial Award recipient in 2018. Ruth is heavily involved in the Youth on the Air initiative in the Americas. She's Assistant Director, Satellite Workshop Leader, and a member of the Youth Planning Committee. She attended the first ever Youth on the Air camp in Region 2 in 2021, both learning as a camper and teaching as the Satellite Workshop Leader. During the camp, she served as the YOTA host for the first scheduled contact with an astronaut through the ARIS program. She's a member of the ARRL, the Gwinnett Amateur Radio Society, the North Fulton Amateur Radio League, the Genesee County Radio Club, the Amateur Radio Club of Columbia County, the Young Ladies Radio League, the Young Amateur Communications Ham Team, AMSAT. CWOPS, and the Straight Key Century Club. Ruth attended Kettering University in Michigan and graduated with a double major in engineering physics and mechanical engineering with a minor in acoustics. She's currently a graduate student at Penn State University, pursuing a Master of Science in Acoustics. Grace Pepe, K8LG. Grace was third generation, 19 years, amateur radio operator from Holland, Michigan. Grace was licensed in 2021 and holds an amateur extra class license. She enjoys communicating via amateur satellites and has so far achieved via satellite DXCC, VUCC, WAS, and WAZ. She's actively working towards the AMSAT Gridmaster Award. Grace has participated in many contests, both as a single op, a multi-operator, and multi-multi. Grace has participated in many major contests, including WAE sweepstakes and several CQWW contests. She was a member of the 2023 K3LR CQWW phone team and the 24 J62K CQ WWWPX phone team. Grace is a member of the ARRL, AMSAT, Holland Amateur Radio Club, Young Amateurs Communications Ham Team, the Westchester Amateur Radio Association, the Northwest Ohio VHF Amateur Radio Society, and the Dayton Amateur Radio Association. Grace is attending Cedarville University in Cedarville, Ohio, where she's studying electrical engineering.
It is with a heavy heart that we announce the passing of Terrence Terry Redding Sr., Ph.D., W6 LMJ SK. John Ross, KD8 IDJ, has more from League headquarters.
He passed away January 4th, 2025. His daughter said he passed holding the hand of his bride as they listened to their favorite song. Terry was one of the longest-serving active members of HWN, 40 years. He also served as a board member of the Hurricane WatchNet, Incorporated, for 9 years. Terry joined the Hurricane WatchNet in 1984 while stationed in Panama using the call sign HP1XTR. His first storm to practice in was Hurricane Diana, which made landfall just north of the North Carolina-South Carolina border. In 1987, he returned to the U.S., living in Lawton, Oklahoma, and held the call sign of WB5LMJ. In 1995, he relocated to West Palm Beach, Florida, and was active using the call sign W6LMJ there. While living in West Palm Beach, Terry and his family unfortunately experienced numerous tropical storms and hurricanes. However, during those hurricanes, he found himself in the position of being a reporting station. In late 2016, I had the honor of making Terry an honorary member of the Hurricane WatchNet for 32 years, Grave writes, of dedicated service. But this honor did not slow Terry down. He would find a way to make himself available to assist in whatever capacity was needed every year, as he had always done. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Terry's on-air help, and more importantly, his friendship, will be greatly missed. He was also an ARRL life member, teacher, instructor, and volunteer examiner.
ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, has introduced the Dream Station Sweepstakes. Here with all the details you need to know is John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Offering members the chance to win an ICOM Dream Station, including a limited edition IC 7760 HF 50 MHz transceiver, an IC PW2 amplifier, and microphone, generously donated by ICOM America. The ARRL sweepstakes began January 3rd and runs until December 31st, 2025. It is the centerpiece of a year-long campaign to encourage new membership and a fun way for current members to extend their support for ARRL. The lucky winner will receive one grand prize that includes a Dream Station comprised of the latest amateur radio equipment from ICOM. The winner will also receive a limited edition Seiko watch celebrating ICOM's 60th anniversary. Participation in the sweepstakes is open to ARRL full-time members in the U.S., and members will automatically earn sweepstakes entries when they join or renew their membership. You can earn one entry there, set up auto-renewal, earn 2 entries, and donate to the ARRL Diamond Club, an entry for every $50 donated. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Members can earn up to 6 entries during the year-long campaign. For more information about the ARRL sweepstakes and official rules, visit the ARRL website.
Alan Morgan, KY10, is the new section manager of the ARRL Kentucky section. Morgan was appointed to the position effective January 1, 2025, following the resignation of Charlie O'Neill, KE4 AIE. Morgan had already been elected to the position for the term beginning April 1, 2025, so will continue in the role for the next term. Morgan is an ARRL life member and previously served as section manager from April 2015 to April 2017. First licensed in 1978, he is active in emergency communications and also enjoys making long-distance contacts on 10 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters.
An important group of repeaters in New South Wales, Australia, will remain silent throughout January after suffering storm damage in mid-December. Several repeaters operated by the Oxley Region Amateur Radio Club, VK2-BOR, were knocked off the air during the storms on December 13th. The damage was said to cause the worst disruption of operation in more than half of a century for the repeaters at the Middle Brother site near Port Macquarie. According to news reports, the host's power distribution system suffered lightning damage. The repeaters, which use the call sign VK2-RPM, are not expected to be back in service until later this month.
Each year, CW Ops, an international organization that promotes and advances Morse code, or CW, in amateur radio communications, accepts nominations for individuals, groups, and organizations for the CW Ops Award for advancing the art of CW. The award recognizes contributions made toward advancing the art or practice of radio communications by Morse code. The Radio Officers Association, or ROA, is the recipient of the 2024 CW Ops Award for advancing the art of CW. ROA honors and preserves the history and accomplishments of radio professionals from across the merchant navy, coast station service, and civil aeronautical industry. Its membership includes nearly 400 former professional radio officers, half of whom hold amateur radio licenses. CW Ops recognized ROA's efforts to preserve CW history through its journal and for the activities that span CW monitoring, on-air nets, and CW-related museum displays and related activities. The award was recently accepted by ROA's Bill Cross, G0ELZ, at the organization's annual meeting in Liverpool, England. It was presented by CW Ops President Stu Rolfe, GW0ETF.
January is the month to put your paddle in the drawer and dust off your straight key. If you have cooties or bugs in your ham shack, you can use them too. It's time for the 19th annual Straight Key Month hosted by the Straight Key Century Club. Throughout the month, you will be able to work Kilo 3 Yankee stations in the United States call areas, including Hawaii, Alaska, and Puerto Rico. In addition, stations from regions within the International Amateur Radio Union membership in Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, Oceania, and South America will also be on the air. Taking their cue from the ARRL's long-running Straight Key Night every January 1st, the Straight Key Century Club extends the event from the 2nd to the 31st of the month. Whether you're a seasoned operator or just beginning your CW journey, you'll find the Straight Key Month to be a great deal of fun while increasing your skills. Information about this event can be found at skccgroup.com/Kilo 3 Yankee.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
As we were all relaxing on Christmas Eve, December 24th, NASA's Parker Solar Probe set a record by flying 3.86 million miles, or 6.1 million kilometers, from the Sun. That approach made the small probe the first and fastest object created by humans to come that close to the Sun, according to a report in Forbes magazine. Its speed was clocked at 430,000 miles per hour, the equivalent of 692,000 kilometers per hour. Nicola Fox, NASA's Associate Administrator for Science Missions, said in a Christmas Eve video that the probe had achieved the very mission it was intended for with its unprecedented flight so close to the Sun. This solar pass came as the probe made its 22nd approach since its launch more than 6 years ago. The probe is well shielded for this latest plunge into the Sun. More than 4 years ago, it entered one of the most powerful coronal mass ejections ever recorded, according to NASA.
Some very clever people at Google Research have worked out and demonstrated a way to study the ionosphere using millions of Android smartphones. See, normally, Global Navigation Satellite System ground stations provide maps of ionospheric total electron content, but their observations are limited to where such ground stations exist. Google Research has shown that by using Android phones as a distributed sensor network and analyzing the Global Navigation Satellite System signals picked up by the phones, they can fill in large gaps in the ionospheric data, effectively doubling the global observational coverage. This can be especially useful in areas like India, Africa, and South America, where Global Navigation Satellite System ground stations are lacking. The system proved its worth by mapping ionospheric plasma bubbles over these areas during the large magnetic storms that we got last year in May.
It is time for this week's edition of AMSAT Satellite Shorts from all over. And this week we begin with congratulations to Mitch Ehrenstorff, AD0HJ, for his outstanding achievements in providing satellite contacts. Mitch has roved an impressive 100 grid squares, earning him the AMSAT VUCC/R Award, number 20. The reverse VUCC or VUCC/R Award, originally introduced by the Central States VHF Society and now carried on by AMSAT, recognizes the dedication of satellite rovers like Mitch. For more information about this prestigious award, you can visit the AMSAT website. Keep on roving, Mitch, and continue to inspire others in the AMSAT community with your remarkable achievements. Next comes news that 2 Chinese astronauts aboard their country's orbiting space station spent 9 hours working outside in the cold vacuum of space, the longest recorded spacewalk, the Chinese Space Administration has said. The astronauts on Chinese Shenzhou 19 mission, Kai Zhui and Song Lingdong, finished their first extravehicular activities, spacewalking in popular parlance, this week, apparently nudging past the previous record of 8 hours and 56 minutes set by 2 American astronauts in 2001, according to Chinese Manned Space Agency. The feat was another sign of China's ambitions to project its power and presence in space. And our final satellite short this week is an announcement from NASA that has announced delays to its Artemis moon program, pushing Artemis II, a crewed mission around the moon, to April 2026, with the Artemis III lunar landing planned for mid-2027. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson emphasized that this timeline keeps the U.S. ahead of China's goal to land on the moon by 2030, highlighting the competitive nature of the space race. The delay follows concerns about the Orion capsule's heat shield, which cracked during re-entry after the uncrewed Artemis I test mission in 2022. Artemis II will proceed with adjustments to the capsule's trajectory, while future missions will feature an upgraded heat shield. Artemis, initiated under former President Trump's administration, aimed not only to return astronauts to the moon, but also to establish lunar bases as a stepping stone for Mars exploration, despite rising costs and development delays. The program's reliance on SpaceX's Starship for lunar landings has raised questions about its cost effectiveness, especially under the incoming Trump administration. Nelson expressed optimism about Artemis's continuity under NASA's next administrator, Jared Isaacman, amid ongoing bipartisan and international support for lunar exploration.
The ARRL Foundation has extended the application deadline for its scholarship program to Monday, January 13th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Information, including the link to apply, can be found at arrl.org/scholarship-program. All applicants must be active licensed amateur radio operators, More than 100 scholarships, ranging from $500 to $25,000, will be awarded to deserving students. The scholarships have been established by generous donors and can help fund a portion of your education. In 2024, 135 scholarships, totaling more than $715,000, were awarded. Young hams throughout the country benefited from scholarships ranging from $500 to $25,000 to assist them with college or university expenses. Funded entirely through the generous contributions of individuals, clubs, and friends, the scholarship program is one of two areas of focus, the other being grants from the Foundation, which is a separate organization that works closely in partnership with ARRL. ARRL Director of Development Kevin Beal, K8EAL, is encouraged by the program. Quote, hams have always been helpful in learning and being able to honor that dedication to education through generously funded scholarship programs helps relieve some of the financial burden that students can experience, he said. All applicants must submit a completed online application. Transcripts and any other additional required documents must be submitted with your application and not emailed separately. A number of scholarships require additional documents, such as a letter of recommendation from a sitting officer of the ARRL-affiliated club. Applications without accompanying transcripts and additional required documents will not be considered. Scholarship recipients will be notified by early June of 2025. Awards are mailed directly to recipient schools and will be awarded in July of 2025. ARRL's mission is to promote and protect the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio, and to develop the next generation of radio amateurs. Through programs like the free youth membership and the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology, ARRL is enabling futures in STEM field careers through amateur radio.
The Indian Institute of Hams has installed 20 digital mobile radio, ham radio base stations for operating amateur radios in government residential schools across the state. The schools, which are located in the interior regions of Karnataka, are run by the Social Welfare Department, and the idea behind establishing the DMR stations is to enable students to operate amateur radios and connect with other operators across the globe. Dr. Sathi Yapal, director of the Bengaluru-based Indian Institute of Hams, said the institute was approached by the department with an objective to create awareness among students about amateur radio and their role during crisis management. To create an awareness among the residential schools located in the rural areas of Karnataka, we went to about 100 schools. Out of the 100 schools, 80 got back to us, and we selected one science teacher and 2 students from each school and conducted an online training program for them, said Dr. Sathi Yapal. Upon completion of the course, they appeared for an exam conducted by the Ministry of Communication, Government of India, and were granted licenses to operate the amateur radios. From the 80 schools, we trained more than 100 teachers and students who qualified and got their licenses from the Ministry of Communications. Besides this, we also established 20 DMR base stations, Dr. Satyapal added. He said the stations will provide them a link to the entire world, and they can establish contacts with radio operators 24/7. The stations will help them interact with amateur radio operators from within and outside India. This will give good exposure to students who are mainly from rural areas. Those who are active in the amateur community are scientists, astronauts, engineers, etc., he said. He said that as the students have been trained to use amateur radios, it will be of help at times of crisis, and they can help establish communication if need be.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a stream to your favorite digital device on Spotify, TuneIn.com, Overcast, iHeartMedia, and wherever you download your podcasts.
Emergency communication was front and center for a group of 30 officers in the West Bengal Civil Service who recently completed amateur radio training as part of their duties in a part of India often beset by weather emergencies and natural disasters. State officials asked the West Bengal Radio Club to lead the instruction, which included an overview of the wireless laws from the Ministry of Telecommunication. The officers learned about their responsibilities as licensees and received demonstrations on various modes of transmission during emergencies. As in other parts of the world, radio amateurs throughout India partner regularly with state agencies to pass emergency traffic and facilitate evacuations, rescues, and civilian preparedness.
The University of Southern California Rocket Propulsion Lab has shattered the international altitude record for amateur rocketry with their Aftershock 2 rocket, reaching an unprecedented 470,000 feet. This achievement surpasses the previous 20-year record of 380,000 feet and establishes Aftershock 2 as the first civilian-built rocket to achieve this altitude. Equipped with the most powerful solid propellant motor ever fired by students and enhanced thermal protection system, the rocket endured hypersonic speeds with innovative features like titanium-coated fins and a custom paint system. On the professional side of rocketry, the first Block 2 version of the giant SpaceX Starship, Ship 33, recently rolled out for testing and completed its first static fire test. It will be stacked on Booster 14 before it is targeted to complete the first flight of the Block 2 reusable upper stage in January this year. This upgraded ship adds catch hardware and an additional ring, making it 1.8 meters taller and now totaling 408 feet when eventually stacked on top of Booster 14. This added height will allow it to pack 300 tons more propellant.
And finally this week, you know how you can fall down a rabbit hole when you start on a project? Fabian Bronlein and Luca Millet were looking at a box on a broken street lamp in Berlin. The box looked like a relay, and it contained a radio. It was a radio-controlled power controller made by a company called EFR. It turns out that these boxes are on many street lamps in many cities, and like you do, they thought about how cool it would be to make lights blink, but on a citywide basis. Ha-ha, right? So they bought a bunch of these EFR devices on the used market and started hacking. They did a lot of background digging and found out that they could talk to the devices both over their local built-in IR port, but also over radio. Ironically, one of the best sources of help they found in reversing the protocol was in the form of actually pressing F1 in the manufacturer's configuration application. They discovered that once they knew some particulars about how a node was addressed, they could turn on and off a device like a street lamp, which they demo with a toy on stage. So far, so cute. But it turns out that these boxes are present on all sorts of power consumers and producers around Central Europe, used to control and counteract regional imbalances to keep the electrical grid stable, which is to say that with the same setup as they had, maybe multiplied to a network of 1,000 transmitters, you could turn off enough power generation and turn on enough load to bring the entire power grid down to its knees. Needless to say, this is when they contacted both the manufacturer and the government. The good news is that there's a plan to transition to a better system that uses authenticated transmissions, and that plan has been underway since 2017. The bad news is that progress has been very slow, and in some cases stalled out completely. The pair view their work here as providing regulators with some extra incentive to help get this important infrastructure modernization back on the front burner. For instance, it turns out that large power plants shouldn't be using these devices for control at all, and they estimate that fixing the oversight could take care of most of the threat with the least effort. National power grids are complicated machines to say the least, and the impact of a failure can be very serious. Just take a look at what happened in 2003 in the U.S. Northeast, for instance. And in the case of real grid failure, getting everything back online isn't as simple as just turning the switches back on again. As Fabian and Luca point out here, it's important to discover and disclose when legacy systems put the grid in potential danger.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone. Headset mics are not used. And be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copies sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard all around the world on the amateur bands, and on great repeater systems like the KB3 CNN Gateway FM Association repeater, on 146.730 MHz every Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m., covering the wide area of western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. If your repeater system carries This Week in Amateur Radio, let us know via email, and we will mention your station in an upcoming edition. Send your information to W2XBS77@gmail.com.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.